The Galactic Council was in chaos. The abduction of Princess Xira of the Zareth Empire had sent shockwaves across the stars. The Zareth were among the most powerful civilizations in the known universe, and their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their influence was vast, their military unmatched, yet even they had failed to prevent the kidnapping. The culprits were none other than the Vroth Dominion, a ruthless and cunning faction known for their brutality. No empire dared challenge them directly, for they operated in the shadows, striking before their enemies could react. The princess was not just royalty, she was the heir to the Zareth throne, a figure of unity among her people. Without her, the empire was vulnerable, and the balance of power in the galaxy threatened to collapse. Desperation spread like wildfire as the emperor sent an urgent plea for aid, offering untold riches to anyone who could bring his daughter back. Yet, despite the reward, no army, no mercenary fleet, no galactic bounty hunter stepped forward. The Vroth were simply too dangerous. And then, to everyone's shock, Earth responded. The Galactic Council had never taken humans seriously. A young species, new to the stars, lacking in fleets, without vast empires or ancient legacies. To many, humans were insignificant, a minor race with nothing to offer. But when the Zareth Emperor's call reached Earth, the response was immediate. They did not send an army. They did not send warships. They sent one man. His name was Commander Adrian Vale, a soldier unlike any the galaxy had seen. A member of Earth's elite Phantom Corps, he was trained in infiltration, assassination, and warfare tactics beyond conventional understanding. While others fought with numbers, Vale fought with precision. While armies needed fleets to conquer, he needed only his mind, his weapons, and his determination. When the Galactic Council heard that Earth had sent just one warrior, they laughed. A single human? What could one man possibly do against the might of the Vroth Dominion? But the Zareth Emperor did not laugh. He had seen the look in Val's eyes, the look of a man who had already decided the outcome of this mission. Vale arrived at the Galactic Council's headquarters, his steps silent but filled with purpose. He carried no elaborate armor, no heavy weaponry, only a reinforced combat suit, an adaptive rifle, and a series of deadly blades forged for close combat. The council members watched in amusement as he stepped forward, unfazed by the doubtful stares. "You are sending me alone?" Vale asked, his voice calm, steady. "You misunderstand, human," one of the counselors sneered. "You are sending yourself to die." But Vale only smirked. "We'll see." He turned to the Zareth Emperor. Where was she taken? The Emperor projected a holographic image of a dying world, Xyphus 9, a planet long abandoned, its surface scarred by war, now serving as a Vroth stronghold. "My intelligence confirms she is being held here. But I warn you, this place is impenetrable. No one who enters ever leaves." Vale studied the image for a moment before nodding. "Then I'll be the first." Without delay, he boarded his ship, a stealth-class vessel modified for infiltration. As the engines roared to life, the Galactic Council members shook their heads. They had seen countless warriors fall before the Vroth. What made this human think he was different? But as Vale disappeared into the void of space, some among them couldn't help but wonder, what if he succeeded? The journey to HFY 9 was perilous. The planet was surrounded by automated defenses, its orbit patrolled by Vroth warships. But Vale was not a man who relied on brute force. He maneuvered his ship through the asteroid fields, using the planet's own debris to mask his approach. Timing every move with precision, he slipped past the Vroth sensors, landing miles away from the fortress that held the princess captive. The landscape was desolate, covered in ruins of forgotten wars. Vale moved quickly, his every step silent, blending into the shadows like a phantom. His first target was an outpost small but well guarded. Taking out the sentries with swift, lethal efficiency, he hacked into their systems, gathering intelligence. What he found only confirmed his suspicions. The princess was not just a hostage, she was a key. The Vroth had taken her for a reason far more dangerous than anyone realized. She was being held in the deepest chamber of the fortress, connected to an ancient machine that pulsed with power. The data suggested that the Vroth planned to use her genetic code to unlock a weapon long buried beneath HFY Sci-Fi, a weapon capable of planetary annihilation. If they succeeded, it wouldn't just be the Zareth Empire at risk. The entire galaxy would fall. Vale exhaled slowly. The mission had just become more than a rescue. Now, he had to stop a doomsday event. Moving under the cover of darkness, he infiltrated the fortress perimeter, avoiding detection with a mixture of stealth and calculated aggression. Every guard he encountered fell without a sound, their bodies vanishing into the night. As he made his way through the labyrinthine corridors, his instincts remained sharp. He could feel it, the weight of an impending battle. The deeper he went, the more heavily guarded the area became. The Vroth were expecting an attack, but they were expecting an army, not a ghost. Finally, he reached the chamber. Through the reinforced glass, he saw her Princess Ixira, suspended within an energy field, her silver hair flowing weightlessly, her golden eyes filled with defiance. Despite her captivity, she was not afraid. But Vale knew that if he didn't act fast, she would not have much time left. He scanned the room. Dozens of heavily armed Vroth stood guard, and beyond them, the ancient machine hummed with an eerie glow. There was no time for subtlety now. Vale activated his combat suit, his visor locking onto targets. The next moment, chaos erupted, like a phantom unleashed. He moved through the battlefield with terrifying speed. His rifle spat precision fire, each shot finding its mark. The Vroth barely had time to react before he was upon them, his blades carving through armor, his strikes too fast to counter. The fortress alarms blared, and reinforcements swarmed in. He fought not like a soldier, but like a force of nature, unstoppable, unyielding. Reaching the control panel, he deactivated the energy field, catching Ixira as she collapsed. Her eyes widened as she saw her rescuer. "You're human?" she whispered in disbelief. He nodded, reloading his weapon. "Stay close if you want to live." Before they could escape, the doors slammed shut. A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber. From the shadows, a towering figure emerged, General Korak, the mastermind behind the kidnapping. A single human did all this? He sneered, his massive frame blocking their only exit. Impressive, but foolish. Vale tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart steady. The real fight was just beginning. Vale moved through the shadows like a predator hunting its prey. The fortress on Exifos 9 had been reduced to burning rubble, but the battle was far from over. The princess was safe for now, but the information he had uncovered inside the enemy stronghold had changed everything. The Vroth Dominion had not kidnapped her just to demand ransom or exert political pressure on the Zareth Empire. They had taken her for a purpose far darker, one that could spell disaster for the entire galaxy. The machine she had been connected to was ancient, its origins unknown even to the Zareth themselves. It was designed to activate only in the presence of royal blood, and the Vroth had planned to use it as a weapon of destruction. Vale had managed to stop them before they could fully activate it, but the threat wasn't over. The real mastermind behind the operation, a figure known only as the Wraith, was still out there, and the Vroth's plans had not ended with the fortress's fall. The princess was no longer just a hostage, she was a target. His ship, a sleek black stealth-class vessel, was hidden in a canyon miles away from the ruins. After escaping the fortress, he had taken Princess Ixira to the ship, ensuring that she was safe before beginning his next move. Now, as she rested in the medical bay, Vale sat in the cockpit. It was encrypted, filled with coded transmissions and hidden coordinates. But one thing was clear. Exifos 9 had only been a temporary holding site. There was another location, a place deeper in the void, where the Vroth were gathering their forces and preparing for something far worse. If he wanted to end this threat, he needed to track them down before they could strike again. His first lead pointed him to Vorix Maw, a lawless space station on the edge of the galactic frontier. It was a place where criminals, bounty hunters, and information brokers thrived, a perfect hiding place for anyone looking to avoid the eyes of the Galactic Council. If the Wraith had left any trail behind, it would be here. Vale powered up the ship, setting course for Vorix Maw. As the engines roared to life, he glanced toward the medical bay, where Ixira remained unconscious. She had been through a lot, and while her psychic, the journey to Vork's Maw was tense. The station had no official docking procedures. One had to fight or bribe their way in. As Vel's ship approached, a deep, distorted voice crackled over the comms. "Identify yourself, traveler, or prepare to be vaporized." Vel smirked, activating a scrambled transmission code he had acquired in a past mission. The voice paused before replying, "Clearance accepted." "Welcome to Vork's Maw." The station loomed ahead, a massive metal structure floating in the void, its surface covered in blinking lights, docking bays, and long-forgotten wreckage. Smugglers, mercenaries, and fugitives called this place home, and every step taken here had to be calculated. Vale disembarked, blending into the crowd as he navigated through the chaotic marketplace filled with black market weapons, illegal cybernetic enhancements, and stolen alien artifacts. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of oil and burnt metal lingering. He made his way to a cantina known as the Hollow Fang, a place notorious for attracting the most dangerous individuals in the sector. If there was information to be found, it would be here. He stepped inside, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Music played from a broken speaker, and alien patrons filled the bar, engaged in hushed conversations, illegal trades, and high-stakes gambling. His target was a Vroth informant known as Rylus, a former Dominion officer who had gone rogue and now sold secrets to the highest bidder. Spotting Rylus in a corner booth, Vale moved toward him, sitting down without invitation. The reptilian alien tensed, his black eyes narrowing. "You've got some nerve, human," Rylus hissed, his claws tapping against the table. "You shouldn't be here." Vale leaned forward, placing a small device on the table, a disruptor that scrambled all listening devices. "I'm looking for someone," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The Wraith. I know the Vroth are planning something big, and I need to know where." Rylus let out a dry laugh. "You think I'd just hand over information like that? The Wraith would kill me before he could finish." Val moved in a blur, grabbing the alien's wrist and twisting it just enough to make him wince in pain. "I don't have time for games," Val said coldly. "Tell me what I need to know, or I start breaking bones." Rylus gritted his teeth before exhaling sharply. All right. The Wraith doesn't stay in one place for long, but there's a meeting happening soon deep in uncharted space. The Vroth are gathering on a hidden world called Draco's Prime. It's a graveyard of dead ships, the perfect place to hide an army. If you really want to stop them, that's where you'll find your next battle. Vale released his grip, standing up. "Coordinates," he demanded. Rylus hesitated for a moment, then sent a data file to Val's wrist device. "You're insane for going there alone," he muttered. Vale smirked. "I've been called worse." Without another word, he turned and left the cantina, disappearing into the shadows before anyone could follow him. As he returned to his ship, his mind was already forming a plan. Draco's Prime was deep in hostile territory, a place where no one ventured unless they were prepared for war. But this wasn't about survival. It was about stopping a threat before it could consume the galaxy. As the ship's engines roared to life, Vale activated the new coordinates. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The night sky above Isthos 9 burned with streaks of fire as the battle began. The fortress, an imposing structure of black metal and towering spires, stood defiant against the incoming assault. The Vroth Dominion had fortified every inch of it. Vale had no fleet behind him, no army at his back, only his weapons, his wits, and the sheer determination that made humans so feared across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had debated for weeks, trying to negotiate the release of Princess Zyra, but diplomacy had failed. The Vroth had no interest in peace. They wanted leverage, power, and control. If no one else would act, then Vale would do it alone. He moved like a shadow through the battlefield, his sleek black armor blending with the darkness. The outer defenses were already crumbling under the distraction he had orchestrated. Hacked drones, stolen Dominion weapons, and strategically placed explosives had turned the Vroth's own technology against them. As their forces scrambled to contain the chaos, Vale slipped through the breaches, navigating the maze-like corridors of the fortress. Every step was calculated, every move precise. He had memorized the schematics, studied the enemy's patrol patterns, and anticipated their defenses. The real fight was about to begin. A group of Vroth soldiers blocked his path, their massive reptilian forms covered in heavy armor, glowing rifles humming with energy. Vale didn't hesitate. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he activated his blade, a weapon of compressed plasma, sharp enough to cut through steel. The first Vroth lunged, but Vale sidestepped effortlessly, driving his blade into the alien's chest before twisting and using the body as a shield against incoming fire. In one fluid motion, he fired his wrist-mounted blaster, taking down 2 more enemies before they could react. The last soldier tried to retreat, but Vale was faster, closing the distance in a blink and slamming the Vroth's head into the wall. The alien collapsed, unconscious. No time to waste. He pressed forward, moving deeper into the fortress. The halls were lined with intricate alien symbols, the air thick with the scent of burning circuits and metal. The Vroth were scrambling now, aware that their stronghold was under attack, but they still didn't realize who they were facing. That worked in Val's favor. He reached the security station, a large room filled with holographic screens and control panels. Knocking out the guards, he accessed the main system, searching for the princess's location. His eyes narrowed as he found her a high-security chamber deep underground. The Dominion hadn't just captured her. They were using her for something. Experimentation? Interrogation? He didn't have time to find out. Alarms blared as he moved to the lower levels, his every step met with increased resistance. He took down enemy after enemy, his movements swift and lethal. The fortress shook from distant explosions, his sabotage efforts still wreaking havoc on their defenses. Reaching the final corridor, he spotted the reinforced door that held the princess. Heavy guards stood in front, their weapons locked and ready. Vale exhaled slowly, then moved. He was a blur of motion, dodging plasma fire, using the environment to his advantage. He slid under a barrage of energy bolts, kicked a rifle from an enemy's hands, and spun into a brutal strike that sent another crashing to the floor. The last guard barely had time to react before Val's blade sliced through his armor, ending the fight in seconds. He pressed his palm against the door's security panel, using the stolen access codes to override the lock. The door hissed open, revealing Princess Xira. She was restrained, her wrists locked in energy cuffs, her silver eyes flashing with defiance despite her weakened state. "You're late," she murmured, her voice laced with exhaustion but unwavering. Vale smirked, stepping forward to release her. "Had to fight through half the Dominion to get here. Hope you're not expecting an easy ride home." As soon as the cuffs deactivated, she staggered, but Vale caught her arm. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded, determination overriding her fatigue. "Then let's get out of here." The moment they stepped back into the corridor, the real danger presented itself. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the halls, followed by the heavy thud of approaching footsteps. Vale recognized the sound immediately, a Vroth commander. They were bigger, stronger, and far deadlier than the average soldier. And this one was waiting for him. Standing at the end of the corridor was Commander Raalkesh, a towering beast clad in reinforced armor, his eyes burning with cold fury. "Human," the commander growled, gripping a massive battle axe pulsing with energy. "You should have stayed in your little world." Vale pushed Xira behind him, tightening his grip on his weapon. "And you should have known better than to take something that doesn't belong to you." Raalkesh didn't waste time with words. He charged, the ground shaking beneath his weight. Vale met him head-on. The force of the missed attack sent cracks through the walls, but Vale was already countering, driving his blade toward the commander's exposed side. Raalkesh blocked with inhuman reflexes, twisting and slamming a fist toward Val's head. He barely ducked in time, retaliating with a blast from his wrist gun, but the commander's armor absorbed most of the damage. This wasn't going to be easy. The fight was brutal. Raalkesh was fast for his size, each strike nearly lethal, but Vale was faster. He moved with precision, wearing the commander down, striking at the weak points in his armor, dodging attacks by the narrowest margins. The battle felt endless, both warriors locked in a deadly dance. Then, just as Raalkesh prepared for a final crushing blow, Vale saw his opening. He feigned left, baiting the commander into overextending, then spun low and drove his plasma blade straight through. Breathing heavily, Vale turned back to Xira. Time to go. They raced through the fortress, dodging the remaining guards as the structure crumbled around them. The stolen codes allowed them to reach the hangar, where Vale's ship waited. With one last sprint, they boarded, the engines roaring to life. As they soared into space, leaving the burning fortress behind, Xira turned to him. "You just took down an entire Dominion base alone," she said, half in awe, half in disbelief. Vale smirked, setting course for home. Just another day for humanity. But deep in the void, the Wraith watched through unseen eyes, a slow smile forming. The real war had just begun. The battlefield was silent, save for the distant echoes of warships burning in the sky. Smoke curled into the crimson horizon, and shattered remains of the once mighty Dominion fortress lay in ruins. Vale stood at the center of it all, his breath steady, his grip firm on his blade. The fight had led him here through fire, through blood, through countless enemies. And now, at last, the real battle was about to begin. Across the ruins, standing like an immovable mountain, was Xerox the Unbroken, the last and most feared warlord of the Vroth Dominion. He was taller than any of his kind, his dark-scaled armor etched with the scars of 1,000 battles. His deep reptilian eyes locked onto Vale, unshaken, unreadable. This was not a battle of armies. This was not a war of strategy. This was the final duel, a test of will, strength, and resolve. Vale exhaled, steadying himself. He had fought warlords before, but Xerox was different. The Dominion's greatest warrior, undefeated in single combat. His blade, forged from the heart of a dying star, pulsed with raw energy, and his movements carried the weight of experience, the precision of a master. No words were exchanged. None were needed. They had both come here for the same reason to end this, once and for all. Xerox moved first, closing the distance in an instant, his blade striking with the force of a meteor. Vale barely had time to react, twisting his body to avoid the deadly arc. Sparks erupted as steel met plasma, the impact sending tremors through the ground. Vale countered swiftly, ducking low and slashing upward, but Xerox deflected the attack with a flick of his wrist, his movements impossibly fast for a being his size. The duel had begun in earnest. They clashed again and again, their weapons a blur of motion, each strike lethal, each dodge measured. Xerox fought with a brutal elegance, every move refined over decades of warfare. Vale, in contrast, was relentless, adapting, shifting, pressing forward with the raw unpredictability that made humans so dangerous. He had trained for this moment, had fought through countless battles to stand here, yet Xerox was pushing him to his limits. Each strike from the warlord sent shockwaves through his arms, each block draining his strength. But Vale refused to falter. Minutes stretched into what felt like eternity. The fortress crumbled further around them, the sky burning brighter with the wreckage of fallen warships. The battle outside was ending, but here, in this ruined courtyard, the real war raged on. Vale feinted left, forcing Xerox to react, then twisted mid-motion, aiming for the warlord's exposed side. The blade connected, drawing black ichor from the alien's flesh, but the victory was short-lived. Xerox retaliated with a brutal backhand strike, sending Vale crashing into the debris. The impact rattled his bones, but he forced himself up. Pain was nothing. This fight was everything. Xerox advanced, relentless, his blade carving through the air like a force of nature. Vale dodged, barely avoiding decapitation, his mind racing. He needed an opening, a weakness. The warlord was strong, but even the strongest had limits. Then, he saw it. Xerox's stance unshaken, perfect, but predictable. Every move had a pattern, a rhythm honed over centuries. And Vale was good at breaking rhythms. He adjusted his stance, his grip tightening on his blade. Xerox lunged, expecting another parry, but this time Vale didn't block. Instead, he sidestepped at the last second, letting Xerox's momentum carry him forward. The warlord recovered instantly, but that fraction of a second was enough. Vale twisted, bringing his blade down in a savage arc. Xerox barely blocked, but the force of the impact staggered him. For the first time, the warlord's footing wavered. Vale pressed the attack. He became faster, more unpredictable. A strike here, a feint there, keeping Xerox on the defensive. The warlord's movements grew tighter, his counters slower. Vale saw at the moment Xerox realized that he was losing. The great undefeated warrior, the legend of the Dominion, was being outmatched. Then, in a final, decisive moment, Vale did the impossible. He threw his blade, not at Xerox's chest, but at his weapon. The impact knocked the warlord's blade from his grasp, sending it skidding across the ground. Xerox's eyes widened in shock, just enough for Val to close the distance. With a single, fluid motion, he drove his fist into the warlord's throat, followed by a swift, crushing blow to the side of his head. Xerox staggered, and before he could recover, Vale retrieved his blade and brought it to the warlord's neck. Silence. The battlefield seemed to freeze. Xerox breathed heavily, his towering form barely holding itself upright. For the first time in his long life, he had been defeated. Vale stared into his enemy's eyes, seeing not fear, but understanding. They had both fought with everything they had, and in the end, only one warrior could stand. Xerox exhaled, then nodded a silent acknowledgement of defeat. "You are worthy," he rasped. His voice filled not with anger, but respect. Vale stepped back, lowering his weapon. He had won, but there was no need for senseless execution. The Dominion had lost. Their empire had fallen. This duel had been about honor, not vengeance. As Xerox fell to his knees, the warlord's forces, scattered across the battlefield, began to surrender. The war was over. Humanity had proven itself once more, not just as a race of survivors, but as warriors who refused to be broken. Vale turned his gaze to the sky, where the last remnants of the Dominion's fleet fled into the void. He had come here as a soldier. He was leaving as a legend. And in the silent ruins of Exifos 9, the galaxy would forever remember the duel that ended a war. The fires of war had finally faded, leaving behind the ruins of Exifos 9 and the echoes of a battle that would be remembered for generations. The Vroth Dominion, once a mighty force that had crushed countless civilizations beneath its rule, was now shattered. Their fleets had been torn apart, their warlords defeated, and their empire left in disarray. And at the center of it all stood Vale, the lone human warrior who had faced the might of the Dominion and emerged victorious. His duel with Xerox the Unbroken had marked the turning point of the war, and now, as the dust settled, all eyes were upon him. The surviving warriors of the Dominion knelt before him, their weapons cast aside, not in fear, but in respect. The defeated warlord, Xerox, remained silent, his reptilian eyes filled with an understanding that only warriors could share. He had fought and lost, but his honor remained intact. For the first time in his life, he had met an opponent he could not overcome. The remaining Dominion forces would not seek revenge. They would return to their worlds, carrying the story of their greatest battle, and the name of the human who had bested them would be spoken with reverence. Vale, however, did not bask in the glory of victory. He had never fought for recognition, nor had he sought to become a legend. He had come to end a war, to ensure that Earth and its allies would never again be threatened by the Dominion's ruthless expansion. And now that the war was over, he felt the weight of his journey pressing down on him. The battlefield, once alive with the chaos of war, now felt empty. The silence was almost unsettling. He had won, but victory had never felt like this before. As he turned away from the ruins, his communicator crackled to life. "Vale," came the voice of Admiral Rains, the leader of the Terran fleet. "The Dominion is standing down. Their fleets are retreating, their warlords surrendering. You did it." There was a pause, then a softer tone. "Are you ready to come home?" The word felt distant, almost foreign. For years, Vale had been at war, moving from one battlefield to the next, never stopping, never looking back. Earth had always been the reason he fought, but now, after so long, the idea of returning felt almost strange. Would he be able to live a normal life after everything he had done? Could he simply walk away from the battlefield and pretend that he was just another soldier? He looked up at the sky, where the Terran fleet loomed above, waiting for him. Around him, the surviving warriors of the Dominion began their solemn march away from the battlefield, returning to their ships, to their worlds, to whatever future awaited them beyond this war. Xerox, still kneeling, finally spoke. "You fought well, human. I do not know what awaits you beyond this place, but I know that your name will not be forgotten." His voice was steady, without bitterness. "You have earned the—" Vale nodded, knowing that was the highest honor a warrior like Xerox could offer. "And you fought with honor, warlord?" he said. "Maybe one day, our paths will cross again not as enemies, but as equals." Xerox gave a slow nod before rising to his feet, towering over the human one last time. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the ruined fortress. The last warlord of the Dominion had been defeated, but he would not be forgotten. Like Vale, he would become a legend in his own right. As Vale made his way to the extraction point, he felt a strange sense of finality settling over him. This was not just the end of a war, it was the end of an era. He had spent years fighting, surviving, pushing himself beyond his limits. But now, for the first time, he had no battle to return to, no enemy left to defeat. The war was over. His purpose, the one thing that had driven him forward for so long, was fulfilled. And yet, something inside him still burned. The warrior in him was not ready to rest. The transport ship was waiting for him, its engines humming softly in the cold air. As he stepped aboard, the crew saluted him, their faces filled with admiration, awe, and something else, recognition. They knew they were looking at someone who had just changed the course of history. Vale was not just a soldier anymore. He was something more. The ship ascended into the sky, leaving the war-torn surface of Xifos 9 behind. Vale gazed out of the viewport, watching as the battlefield became nothing more than a distant memory. He knew that stories would be told about this day, about the warrior who had stood alone against an empire and emerged victorious. Songs would be sung, histories would be written, and his name would be whispered in the halls of warlords and emperors across the galaxy. But for Vale, none of that mattered. He had done what needed to be done. He had fought, he had endured, and he had won. Now, he would return home not as a soldier, not as a conqueror, but as a legend. And somewhere, in the vast reaches of space, another war was waiting. Another battle would call to him. Because a true warrior's journey never truly ends.